Changing diapers is your job, not mine, Patricia Montgomery shouted, throwing the dirty diaper onto the Italian marble floor of the mansion. The damp sound echoed through the $15 million bedroom, making Mary Silva kneel once again that Tuesday morning. I pay you exactly for that, you incompetent woman. Mary was 52. Her hands calloused from a lifetime of caring for people, and she had long grown accustomed to humiliation since she started working as a caregiver in that house 2 years ago. But that day, with 3 housemaids watching from the doorway, something inside her registered every word as if it were the very first time. The Beverly Hills mansion was a monument to excess. Imported paintings from Europe on the walls, baccarat crystal on every table, Persian rugs that cost more than Mary would earn in 10 lifetimes. And there she was, in the middle of all that luxury, on her knees, cleaning human waste while her patient's daughter-in-law looked on with that cruel smile that seemed permanently glued to her Botoxed face. "Faster, Mary," Patricia ordered, crossing her arms over the $30,000 Versace dress. "My father-in-law needs his morning bath, and you haven't even finished cleaning up this mess. Honestly, I don't know how anyone can be so slow." Albert Montgomery, 78, lay on the imported hospital bed, seemingly unconscious. But Mary knew that man better than anyone else in that house. She noticed the small finger movements when Patricia spoke, the almost imperceptible furrow of his brow when the insults came. He was awake, listening to everything, processing every cruelty. "Excuse me, Mrs. Patricia," Mary whispered, still on her knees. "Mr. Albert needs his 8 o'clock medication. It's 7:55. "Medication?" Patricia laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the air. "Do you really think it makes any difference? Look at him. He's a vegetable, an $80 million vegetable, but still a vegetable." The maids in the doorway exchanged uneasy glances. Rosa, the oldest, had worked for Albert for 20 years and knew that her employer understood everything. But no one dared confront Patricia. She had made it clear from day one that she controlled the firings. Mary rose slowly, her back protesting after hours of tending to the patient through the night. She had changed Albert 3 times, given him a sponge bath at 4 in the morning when he had a fever, massaged his legs to prevent bed sores. All while Patricia slept soundly in her master suite on the other side of the mansion, with the air conditioning set to 64 degrees and Egyptian cotton sheets that cost $5,000. "I'll prepare the medication," Mary said, walking toward the medicine cart she kept organized with military precision. "Wait," Patricia interrupted. "First finish cleaning this properly. And use your hands, not the cloth. I want you to understand exactly what your place in this house is." Mary froze. For 2 seconds that felt like 2 hours. She stood still. Then, slowly, she turned to Patricia. "My place, Mrs. Patricia, is to take care of Mr. Albert. That's what I've been doing for 2 years, every day, every night." "Your place." Patricia stepped closer, the $2,000 French perfume filling the air, "is to do as I say. Or have you forgotten you earn only $2,800 a month? That's what I spend on a single shopping trip." It was true. Mary earned $2,800 to work 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. She slept in the maid's room, ate leftovers from the kitchen, and endured daily humiliation. But there was something Patricia didn't know. Something no one in that house suspected. Mary wasn't just a caregiver. She was a registered nurse with 30 years of ICU experience at the best hospitals in Los Angeles. And she had taken that job for a very specific reason, one that only she and Albert knew. Mary finished cleaning the floor in silence, every movement calculated to hide the storm raging inside her. As she prepared Albert's medication with the precision of someone who had spent 3 decades in ICUs, her mind went back to the day it had all begun, 2 years earlier. She had been fired from Cedars-Sinai after blowing the whistle on a scheme involving stolen medications. At 50, she discovered that no one wanted to hire a problematic nurse, no matter how impeccable her resume. That's when she saw the ad for a private caregiver. The Montgomery surname caught her attention immediately. Albert Montgomery had been one of the wealthiest pharmaceutical entrepreneurs in the country, building an $80 million empire from scratch, starting out as a drug salesman in rural Ohio. What Mary discovered during the interview changed everything. Albert, already debilitated by the stroke he had suffered 6 months earlier, recognized her. She had been the head ICU nurse when he nearly died of a heart attack 20 years before. With limited gestures and broken speech, he managed to communicate the essential. He needed her, not just as a caregiver, but as a guardian. His eyes conveyed a desperation Mary would never forget. During the silent nights when Patricia and Albert's only son, Richard, thought the patriarch was asleep, Mary uncovered the truth about that family. Albert could speak when calm and focused, usually between 3 and 5 in the morning, when the medication was balanced and no one else was around. He told her about Richard, the son he had raised alone after his wife died of cancer, and how the promising boy had become a weak man, completely dominated by the ambitious woman he married. Patricia Rodriguez Montgomery was a former model who had met Richard at a business party. Within 6 months they were married, and within a year, she controlled all the family's finances. Richard, with a degree in business but no real talent, let his wife make every decision while he spent his days at the country club playing tennis and drinking imported whiskey. Albert watched helplessly as his empire was drained by his daughter-in-law, who wired massive sums to offshore accounts, bought properties under fake names, and bled the companies dry with phony consulting firms. But the stroke had created the perfect excuse. To the outside world, Albert Montgomery was a vegetable, incapable of making decisions, fully dependent. The doctors, generously paid by Patricia, signed reports confirming his total incapacity. Mary was the only one who knew the truth. During those early morning hours, she helped Albert practice speaking, move his fingers, keep his mind sharp. He told her stories about building his empire, taught her about medications in 4 different languages he spoke fluently: French, English, Italian, and German, skills he had acquired through decades working with international labs. In return, Mary protected his secret, administered the medications Patricia tried to tamper with, and kept a detailed record of everything happening in that house. The tiny maid's room where Mary slept was barely 6 by 9 feet, with a twin bed and a creaky wardrobe. But hidden in a false compartment she had built was her greatest asset: a digital recorder that captured every humiliation, every attempt to alter medication, every compromising conversation. Albert had asked for it in the first month, foreseeing they would need proof when the time was right. The following weeks were a crescendo of cruelty that tested the limits of human dignity. Patricia seemed to have found in Mary the perfect target for venting her frustration over Albert's prolonged survival. Every Thursday, she hosted tea parties with her country club friends, all wives of wealthy men, all equally bored and cruel. Mary was forced to serve in a degrading uniform Patricia had ordered especially for her. A ridiculous combination of ruffles and apron that made her look like a caricature of a Victorian maid. The friends laughed while Patricia told fabricated stories about Mary's incompetence, about how she was too stupid to understand simple instructions, fully aware that Mary was right there, listening, while pouring tea into fine English porcelain cups worth $2,000 a set. The worst came on a particularly cruel afternoon in November. Patricia had drunk more champagne than usual at lunch with her friends. When Mary went upstairs to give Albert his 2 o'clock medication, she found Patricia in the bedroom with 3 of her closest friends, Susan, Beatrice, and Caroline, all staring at the elderly man as if he were a circus act. "Look at this," Patricia said, pulling back Albert's blanket to expose his frail body in pajamas. $80 million reduced to this. Sometimes I wonder if it wouldn't be more merciful just to... She made a throat-slashing gesture, and the friends laughed nervously. Mary felt her blood boil but kept her composure. "Excuse me, Mrs. Patricia, Mr. Albert needs his medication now." "Medication?" Susan, a 50-year-old blonde with more plastic surgery than original skin, chimed in. "For what? He doesn't even know he exists anymore." That's when Patricia had her cruelest idea yet. "You know what we'll do? Mary will show us how she changes his diaper. It'll be educational." Her friends laughed awkwardly but curiously, while Mary's stomach churned. "Mrs. Patricia, this is not appropriate. Mr. Albert deserves privacy and dignity," Mary said firmly. "Dignity?" Patricia burst out laughing. "What dignity does someone have when they soil themselves? Come on, Mary, either you put on the show or you're out of a job today." Mary looked at Albert and saw a tear roll down the corner of his left eye. He was fully conscious, trapped in a body that wouldn't obey, humiliated in front of strangers. With hands trembling from rage, not fear, Mary began the procedure, narrating each step in a clinical, professional tone, turning what was meant to be a grotesque spectacle into a nursing lesson. Her dignity and competence were so evident that even Patricia's friends grew uncomfortable. Beatrice was the first to leave, mumbling about another commitment. Caroline followed. Only Susan remained, though even she seemed disturbed. It was during a special dinner 2 months before the end that Mary discovered just how far Patricia was willing to go. Richard had finally come home after 2 weeks vacationing with friends in Aspen. During dinner, served in the dining room overlooking the lit winter garden, Mary was forced to stand beside the table in case Albert needed anything. The couple's conversation was revealing. "The doctor said it could still take years," Richard commented between bites of lobster that cost $30 a pound. "We can't wait that long," Patricia replied, sipping French wine that cost $3,000 a bottle. "The companies need decisions. We need the full power of attorney now." Mary noticed when Patricia discreetly poured a white powder into the glass of juice meant for Albert later. Without hesitation, when she picked up the tray in the kitchen, Mary switched the glasses, dumping the suspicious liquid down the drain and preparing a fresh juice. She saved a sample of the powder left at the bottom of the original glass. Later, using old hospital contacts, she learned it was a powerful sedative in a dangerous dose for someone in Albert's condition. Not to kill him, yet, but to leave him even more incapacitated, closer to the vegetative state Patricia kept proclaiming. From that day forward, Mary never again left Albert alone with food or drink prepared by others. She prepared everything herself, tested everything, protecting the man who had become more than a patient. He had become her mission, her way of redemption after years of witnessing injustices in the healthcare system without being able to intervene. That Monday morning began with Patricia's screams echoing through the entire mansion. Mary had just finished bathing Albert when she heard the sound of furious heels pounding up the marble staircase. The bedroom door burst open, and Patricia stormed in like a hurricane, her face red with rage, clutching a crumpled piece of paper in her hand. "What did you do, you miserable woman?" she screamed, throwing the paper in Mary's face. It was a medical bill from a private lab showing that Albert had undergone full blood tests the previous week, tests that revealed altered levels of sedatives in his system. Mary kept her composure as she adjusted Albert's blanket. Dr. Henry requested routine tests. It's standard protocol for patients bedridden this long. She answered calmly, knowing that Albert's private physician, one of the few still loyal to the patriarch, had cooperated with the investigation. Protocol! Patricia stepped dangerously close, her expensive perfume mixed with the lingering smell of last night's alcohol. "Do you think I'm stupid? I know exactly what you're trying to do. You want to take advantage of a senile old man. You're after a piece of the inheritance." That's when something unexpected happened. Albert, who had appeared unconscious, began convulsing. His face turned purple, his eyes rolled back, and a guttural sound escaped his throat. Mary immediately recognized the signs of cardiac arrest and sprang into action with the speed of her 30 years of experience. "Out of the way!" she ordered Patricia, who froze in place. Mary began resuscitation maneuvers with surgical precision, alternating chest compressions and rescue breaths. Every second counted. Every movement had to be flawless. Patricia watched in shock as Mary literally fought for Albert's life. For 3 endless minutes, the caregiver worked tirelessly, sweat running down her face, her arms aching from the effort, but never faltering for even a second. When Albert finally began to breathe again, coughing and opening his eyes, Patricia was pale as a sheet. Mary had just saved $80 million with her own hands, the third time in 2 years she had done so, but this time with a witness present. "If he dies," Patricia said when she finally found her voice, her arrogance snapping back into place like a mask. "If my father-in-law leaves you even a single cent in the will, I swear I'll eat that dirty diaper off the floor. Do you hear me? I'll eat the diaper and still sue you for elder abuse." The threat dripped with venom, but also with desperation. Patricia knew something was different. Albert had been more alert in recent weeks. His eyes followed conversations, his fingers moved with purpose. What Patricia didn't know was that Dr. Henry had documented everything. Every cardiac arrest Mary had reversed, every suspicious medication change, every improvement achieved through specialized care. The doctor, a friend of Albert's for 40 years, kept a complete dossier that would soon prove crucial. That very afternoon, while Patricia was out on one of her usual shopping trips, Mary received a surprise visit from Dr. Henry. He brought news that would change everything. The latest test showed Albert was responding well to the secret physical therapy Mary performed at night. More importantly, his cognitive function was perfectly preserved, contradicting all the falsified reports Patricia had paid for. "Mary," Dr. Henry whispered, checking to make sure they were alone. "Albert asked me to tell you something. He wants you to know he's aware of everything you've done. Every humiliation you endured, every time you saved his life, every sleepless night caring for him, it's all recorded here." He showed her a folder full of documents. "And when the time comes, the truth will surface. Stay strong. Just a few more days." The nights at the Montgomery mansion were a world apart, a secret universe where Mary and Albert existed beyond Patricia's cruel gaze. Between 3 and 5 in the morning, when the sedatives wore off and before the next dose, Albert experienced moments of lucidity that no one who saw him during the day would ever believe. In those precious hours, Mary discovered layers of the man behind the empire, stories no biography would ever tell. "Mary," Albert whispered one night, his voice hoarse but clear, "I need to tell you about Lucille." It was the first time he mentioned the name of his wife, dead for 30 years. "She would have liked you. You had the same strength, the same dignity in the face of adversity." As Mary massaged his legs to prevent atrophy, Albert recounted how he had built his empire from scratch, selling medicines door to door in small-town Ohio, sleeping in cheap motels, surviving on bread and coffee to save every penny. It was during these late-night conversations that Mary began to understand the depth of the family tragedy. Richard had been a brilliant child. He spoke 3 languages by 12, played the piano like a professional at 15. But his mother's death shattered him in ways Albert could never repair. "I tried to be both father and mother," Albert confessed, silent tears running down his time-worn face. "But I failed. I gave him money when he needed presents. I gave him gifts when he needed hugs. And now look at what he's become, a weak man in the hands of a woman with no scruples." Mary had developed an elaborate system to protect these moments. She installed small silent alarms that vibrated if anyone approached the bedroom. She always kept a syringe with a mild sedative ready in case she needed to fake that Albert had been medicated. Most importantly, she recorded every conversation, every confession, every instruction he gave about his business and wishes. During one of those nights, Albert revealed something that left Mary breathless. "The DNA test," he said, his eyes sharp despite his age. "Richard doesn't know, but I had one done when he was 5. I always had doubts. Lucille had a brief affair before she got pregnant." Mary held her breath as he continued. "But you know what I found? It didn't matter. Blood or not, he was my son. I raised him, loved him, watched his first steps. That's what makes a father, not DNA." It was also in those hours that Albert displayed his linguistic skills, dictating letters in French to old business partners, explaining medical terms in Latin, telling jokes in Italian he had learned on business trips. Mary, who had studied English and Spanish in college, was amazed at the sharp mind hidden inside that frail body. She began bringing books, reading to him in different languages, stimulating his memory with complex exercises. But the most shocking moment came when Mary detected the attempt at poisoning. She had noticed that Albert's condition worsened drastically after visits from Beatrice, the personal chef Patricia had hired to prepare special meals. Using her pharmacology knowledge, Mary identified traces of digitalis in non-lethal but debilitating doses in the food. Confronted with the evidence one night, Albert didn't seem surprised. "I know," he said simply. "I've known from the beginning. But I needed proof. I needed someone trustworthy to document everything. You are my witness, Mary, my guardian of the truth." From that moment on, Mary didn't just care for Albert, she actively protected him. She swapped plates, tested foods, pretended to give medications she later discarded. And Albert, pretending to worsen during the day, was in fact regaining strength. His muscles, secretly exercised by Mary, retained some tone. His mind, stimulated by conversations and readings, remained razor sharp. It was a dangerous cat-and-mouse game, where the mouse played dead while the cat grew overconfident. The diagnosis came on a gray Thursday in December, delivered by Dr. Mendez, the physician Patricia had bought. Multiple organ failure, he announced with false solemnity to Patricia and Richard, who had been dragged from the country club to hear the good news. I believe these are his final 72 hours. I suggest you begin preparations. Patricia barely concealed her smile, while Richard looked genuinely shaken, but not enough to put down the whiskey glass he had been holding since 10 in the morning. Mary stood in the corner of the room, invisible as always, but observing every micro-expression, every glance exchanged between the couple. She saw when Patricia whispered something to Dr. Mendez and he nodded discreetly. She saw when Richard signed papers without even reading them, his hand trembling slightly from alcohol. And most of all, she saw the faint smile at the corner of Albert's lips. So subtle, only she, who knew every line of his face, could notice. As soon as they were alone, Mary approached Albert. "Did you hear everything?" she asked softly. Albert blinked once, for yes, his code when others were nearby. 72 hours then, Mary said, adjusting his pillows. Let's make every minute count. What followed was a silent race against time, though not the kind Patricia imagined. During the day, Mary kept up the charade, appearing resigned to the approaching end. At night, she and Albert worked feverishly with Dr. Henry, who slipped in through the back door. On the first night of the supposed final 72 hours, Albert dictated his true will to Dr. Henry, every word recorded and transcribed with legal precision. Mary served as one of the witnesses, along with Rosa, the longtime maid who also knew the truth about Albert's lucidity. The document was a masterpiece of poetic justice, each clause carefully designed to ensure the truth would prevail. On the second night, while Patricia discreetly celebrated with French champagne downstairs, Albert did something extraordinary. With Herculean effort and Mary's help, he sat up in bed and recorded a 20-minute video. His voice was weak but clear, his mind as sharp as ever. "If you're watching this," he began, staring directly into the camera, "it means I have finally freed myself from the prison of my own body. But before I leave, I need you to know the truth about the last 2 years of my life." The video detailed every attempt at manipulation, every dose of poison disguised, every humiliation he had seen Mary endure. But most importantly, it revealed the true character of each person around him. How Richard had become a drunken puppet in his wife's hands, how Patricia had systematically looted his companies, and how Mary, a stranger who had become more family than blood, had been his guardian angel. On the third night, the last of the 72 hours, something changed. Albert was genuinely worse, his breathing more labored, his body finally surrendering after the long battle. Mary stayed at his side every second, holding his hand, whispering words of comfort. At 4:37 in the morning, he called her with surprising clarity. "Mary," his voice was calm, at peace. "You gave me back my dignity in my final years. You gave me the chance to die as I lived, fighting. Don't cry for me. What comes now is justice, not revenge. Remember that." At 5:45 on Sunday morning, while Patricia slept peacefully dreaming of millions and Richard lay passed out drunk on the living room couch, Albert Montgomery took his final breath in Mary's arms. She gently closed his eyes, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Rest now, warrior. I'll take care of the rest." The sun was rising over Los Angeles when Mary finally allowed the tears to fall. They weren't just tears of sorrow, but of gratitude for having known a man who, even chained to his own body, never lost his humanity. Now the last battle would begin, and Mary was ready to honor the trust Albert had placed in her. The news of Albert Montgomery's death spread through the mansion like wildfire as soon as Mary came down the stairs from the master bedroom. It was 6 o'clock Sunday morning when she found Rosa in the kitchen, preparing coffee no one would drink that day. "He's gone," Mary said simply, and Rosa dropped the cup she was holding, the crash of porcelain against granite echoing through the silent house. It was Rosa who had the thankless task of waking Patricia, who appeared in the living room still in her silk robe, her hair perfectly styled even fresh out of bed, a skill that had always puzzled Mary. "Finally," Patricia whispered when she personally confirmed Albert was dead, but loud enough for Mary to hear from the hallway. Richard showed up an hour later, still reeking of alcohol, his eyes red, whether from crying or a hangover, probably both. For a fleeting moment, when he saw his father's body, something genuine flickered across his face, a shadow of the boy who had once idolized that man. But Patricia quickly pulled him into the office, and when they came out, Richard was signing papers authorizing the most expensive, ostentatious funeral Los Angeles had ever seen. The wake was held in the mansion's grand hall, transformed into an improvised chapel that cost $50,000 in flowers alone. White orchids, imported from Thailand, specially cultivated black roses, arrangements that looked more like sculptures than decorations. The mahogany casket with gold details cost another $80,000. Patricia wanted to make sure all of LA's elite saw how she honored her father-in-law's memory, every detail calculated to impress and build the narrative of the devoted daughter-in-law. Mary was relegated to the kitchen throughout the wake, expressly forbidden by Patricia to appear in the hall. "You're just the help," Patricia spat when Mary tried to say goodbye to Albert before they closed the casket. "Help doesn't mingle with decent people. Stay in the kitchen where you belong." But Mary didn't need to be in the hall to know what was happening. Rosa, Claire, and the other housemaids took turns bringing updates. They talked about the businessmen who came to offer condolences and left murmuring about the economic recovery the company would now enjoy. About the society ladies whispering how much Patricia would inherit. About Richard, increasingly drunk, sobbing into the arms of anyone who showed even a shred of compassion. The most revealing moment came when the family's attorney, Dr. August Fernandez, arrived discreetly and asked to speak with Patricia in private. Mary, who was arranging the plates for the reception, managed to catch fragments of the conversation through the office door left slightly ajar. "The reading of the will be tomorrow at 3 p.m., the lawyer said formally. "All named parties must be present." Patricia laughed, that crystalline, fake sound Mary knew so well. "All named parties? It's just me and Richard, Dr. Fernandez. Or did my father-in-law leave something to a church?" The silence that followed was eloquent. "All named parties, Mrs. Patricia," the lawyer repeated before leaving. During the wake, Mary watched from the kitchen as Los Angeles' elite paraded through the hall. Politicians, executives, celebrities, everyone who had benefited in some way from the Montgomery empire. But none seemed genuinely sad. They were well-dressed vultures circling a carcass, calculating how they could profit from the patriarch's death. Only one person showed true grief, a 70-year-old woman Mary recognized from old photos. It was Helen, Albert's secretary for 30 years, retired for 5. She cried quietly in a corner, ignored by everyone. And when she passed by the kitchen asking for a glass of water, she hugged Mary for a long time. "He talked about you," Helen whispered. "The few times we managed to speak on the phone. He said you were an angel. Thank you for taking care of him." The conference room at Fernandez and Associates occupied the entire 23rd floor of a mirrored high-rise on Avenue of the Stars in Century City. At exactly 3 p.m. on Monday, 1 week after the funeral, everyone summoned was present. Patricia arrived in a black Chanel that had cost $40,000. Appropriate mourning, as she told Richard, who could barely stay sober at 3 in the afternoon. Mary arrived wearing the same simple black dress she had bought at a department store 5 years earlier, the only one she owned for formal occasions. "What is this maid doing here?" Patricia exploded the moment she saw Mary enter the room. "This is a family meeting, not a union convention." Dr. August Fernandez, a 65-year-old gentleman with impeccable posture, adjusted his glasses and answered with professional calm. "Ms. Silva was summoned because she is named in Mr. Albert Montgomery's will. Her presence is legally required." Patricia went livid. But before she could protest further, others began arriving. Rosa, the longtime maid, Dr. Henry, several charities represented by their attorneys. Each arrival made Patricia more nervous and Richard more confused. When everyone had taken seats around the immense glass table, Dr. Fernandez cleared his throat and began. "This is the last valid will of Albert Montgomery, notarized 6 months ago, with full mental capacity attested by a competent medical board." Patricia visibly relaxed. 6 months earlier, Albert was still relatively well before the complications she had orchestrated. The lawyer started by reading the smaller bequests: $1 million to former Secretary Helen, $500,000 to Rosa and other longtime employees, donations to hospitals and charities totaling $5 million. Patricia did quick mental math. Out of $80 million, that still left $73.5, more than enough of a fortune. "As for the principal assets," Dr. Fernandez continued, his voice steady and neutral, "the companies, real estate, and financial investments totaling approximately $73 million. Patricia leaned forward, hands clenched over an $85,000 Hermes bag. "I leave 70%, $51,100,000 to Mary Silva, who over the last 2 years was more family to me than my own blood." The silence that followed was absolute. Patricia turned white as paper, then red, then purple. Richard dropped the whiskey glass he'd been hiding. Mary felt the air leave her lungs, her legs go weak, the world spin. "This is impossible," Patricia finally managed to scream. "He was senile, incapacitated. I have medical reports." Dr. Fernandez signaled to his assistant, who turned on a 70-inch television on the wall. Mr. Montgomery anticipated this challenge. He left an explanatory video. Albert's image appeared on the screen, sitting up in bed, lucid and articulate. The date in the corner showed 3 days before his death. "If you're watching this," his voice filled the room, "it's because I've finally been freed. But first, I need to clarify some truths. First, I was never mentally incapacitated. The reports my daughter-in-law will present are fraudulent, purchased with money she diverted from my companies. The camera showed documents, wire transfers, irrefutable proof. Second, for 2 years, I was a prisoner in my own body, but not in my mind. I saw every cruelty, every attempt to poison me, every humiliation Mary endured to care for me." The video continued for 20 devastating minutes. Albert detailed how Mary had saved his life 3 times, how she had detected the gradual poisoning, how she had endured daily humiliations without ever failing to care for him with absolute dedication. "She cleaned my filth while you counted my money. She held my hand on nights of pain while you slept on sheets bought with stolen funds. She was a daughter when my son chose the bottle. She was a warrior when I needed protection. She was an angel when I saw only demons around me. Patricia tried to stand to leave, but Dr. Fernandez stopped her. You need to watch until the end. It's a legal procedure. The video then showed the most devastating part. Richard, my son. Albert looked directly into the camera, tears running down his face. You were my greatest joy and my greatest sorrow. I leave you the remaining 30%, about 22 million, but with one condition. You will only receive it if you spend 6 months sober, working at one of the companies, learning what I tried to teach you all my life. Mary will serve as administrator until you prove you deserve it. If you fail, everything goes to charity. The final part was addressed to Patricia. As for you, my dear daughter-in-law, I leave nothing but a message. I have proof of all your crimes. Embezzlement, attempted homicide, document forgery. Mary has everything recorded, documented, proven. If you contest this will, if you attempt to harm Mary in any way, the evidence goes to the police. You have a choice: accept and disappear, or fight and get to know prison. When the video ended, Patricia was in shock, trembling like a leaf, her perfect face twisted by rage and fear. You set this up, she spat, pointing at Mary. You manipulated a sick old man. You... The words died as she watched Mary pull a small recorder from her pocket and press play. Patricia's own voice filled the room. If that miserable old man dies soon, I promise you'll get a nice bonus. Increase the sedative dose. Make it look natural. It was a conversation with Dr. Mendez from 3 weeks earlier, captured with crystal clarity. Mary had dozens of such recordings, each more incriminating than the last. Years of prison in every audio file. Patricia collapsed into a chair, all arrogance evaporated. Richard, for the first time in years, was completely sober from the shock, looking at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. You tried to kill my father? He asked, his voice breaking like that of a lost boy. You poisoned my father? Mary finally spoke, her voice calm and controlled. Mr. Richard, your father loved you more than anything. Every night he cried over what you had become, but he never lost hope. That's why the condition in the will. He wanted to give you one last chance to be the man he knew you could be. Richard began to cry, not the drunks weeping everyone knew, but genuine tears of remorse. I failed him. I let her... He pointed at Patricia. I let her do all of this. There's still time to make it right, Mary said gently. Your father left the company structured. He left trusted people in key positions. If you accept help, if you truly want to change, I'll be there. Not as your maid, but as someone who loved your father and wants to honor his memory. Dr. Fernandez cleared his throat, bringing everyone back to the legal matters. Mrs. Montgomery, he addressed Patricia, you have 72 hours to vacate the mansion. You may take your personal belongings, nothing more. Ms. Silva, he turned to Mary, the house is yours now, as is controlling interest in the companies. Patricia stood, her face a mask of pure hatred. She stopped in front of Mary and whispered, Remember the promise. I said I'd eat that dirty diaper if you inherited a cent. Mary met her gaze calmly. I remember, Mrs. Patricia. But unlike you, I take no pleasure in humiliating anyone. Leave, live your life, and be grateful every day you're not in prison. The room emptied slowly, leaving only Mary and Richard. He looked at her with eyes red from crying. Mary, will you really help me? After everything my wife did, everything I let happen? Mary thought of Albert, of his last words, of his desire to see his son redeemed. Your father said everyone deserves a second chance, but only one, Mr. Richard. If you waste it, there won't be a third. When Mary finally arrived at the mansion that now belonged to her, she found the staff gathered in the kitchen, anxious about their future. She reassured them immediately. Anyone who wants to stay, stays. With a 50% raise and full benefits, this house needs life, joy, things it's lacked for a long time. Rosa hugged her, crying. "You're going to be a wonderful boss," Mary corrected her gently. "I'm not anyone's boss, Rosa. We're a family now, the kind Mr. Albert always wanted." That night, Mary went up to the room where Albert had spent his last years. Everything was as he had left it. Even the faint scent of his French cologne still lingered in the air. She sat in the armchair where she had spent so many nights caring for him and let the tears finally fall freely. "I promised I'd take care of everything," she whispered into the quiet. "And I will. I'll take care of your son, your companies, your legacy. But most of all, I'll make sure your story is told, that everyone knows Albert Montgomery died fighting, died lucid, died his way." Mary Silva, the caregiver who changed diapers for $2,800 a month, now controlled an $80 million empire. But more important than the money, she carried the trust of a man who saw in her what his own blood could not be. True family. And with that heavy inheritance on her shoulders, she would do exactly what Albert had asked in his final words. She would take care of the rest. After all, it was what she had always done. Caring was her vocation, her strength, and now, her mission. Money hadn't bought character, it had merely revealed who everyone truly was. And Mary Silva had revealed herself to be exactly what Albert always knew she was, an angel disguised as a caregiver.